Speak these words before you buy the lottery ticket. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the words spoken before any exchange of money set the very current that the money must follow. And if you have ever stood at that counter with a folded bill and a small flutter of hope rising in your chest, you already know exactly what tonight is about. There is a verse in Isaiah, chapter 65, verse 24, that says, "Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear." And Florence Scovel Shinn would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it?" The answer is arranged before the asking is even finished, which means the ticket was never the plan. The word spoken before the ticket is the plan. You were taught to hope after the purchase, when the truth is the consciousness before the purchase is what decides everything. And if that lands on you tonight the way it landed on so many who came before you, know that you are not the only one who bought hope at a counter and left with nothing but a slip of paper and a held breath. So before you buy anything tonight, before you stand in that line, say it with me: I am not buying luck. I am declaring my good. My word is my wand. Again, I am not buying luck. I am declaring my good. My word is my wand. And if you would like tomorrow's teaching to find you the way this one did, let this be the moment you subscribe. Quietly, without pressure, just so the next word reaches you when you need it. If something in you just went still while you heard that, type the 2 words, "God supplies," right there in the comments, and let that be your seal. Key 1. It is not the ticket, it is the state you are in when you pick it up. The first key is this. It is not the ticket that carries power. It is the state you are in when you pick it up. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that money is simply a symbol, and a symbol always takes on the color of the consciousness that hands it across the counter. So a woman who reaches into her purse with a knot of fear in her stomach, thinking, "Please, just this once, let it be enough," is planting a seed of lack no matter how many numbers she circles. But a woman who reaches for that same slip of paper with a quiet, settled knowing, who says inwardly, "I already live in a universe of endless supply, this is simply one more channel among many," plants an entirely different seed. It is not about which numbers are lucky. It is about which consciousness is speaking. The ticket is neutral. It has always been neutral. It only ever mirrors back the state of the hand that holds it. Picture a young man standing in line at the corner store on a Friday night, his paycheck already spent 3 ways before it even arrives. And as he counts out the coins for his ticket, his shoulders sit high near his ears, his breath is shallow, his eyes keep darting toward the register as though the cashier might somehow see the worry written across his chest. He buys the ticket the way a man bails water out of a sinking boat. Quickly, desperately, hoping the next handful will finally be enough to keep him afloat. And Florence Scovel Shinn would say, that man has already answered his own prayer before he ever scratches a single number. Because the universe cannot hand back calm abundance to a consciousness that is shouting lack with every fiber of its being. Now picture a woman 2 nights later. Same counter, same clerk, same little paper slip. But she has spent the afternoon quietly repeating to herself that she lives inside a generous and endless supply. And she steps up to that counter almost amused, almost light, because she is not begging the universe for rescue. She is simply allowing one more small door to open among the many doors already open in her life. Before we continue, if you have been speaking the words, and your money, your health, or your love life still look the same, the words were never the problem. So I created the source code, a 90-day program that gives you the missing piece to finally bend your reality. You can find it on getsourcecode.sco, link in the description. Now back to the video. She could lose that ticket in her coat pocket and forget about it entirely and still sleep soundly that night because her peace was never resting on the outcome. It was resting on her own settled knowing. This is the heart of the first key. Before your fingers even touch the counter, pause. Feel what you are actually feeling. If it is scarcity, wait. Breathe. Do not buy from that place. If it is calm and open and unhurried, you are ready. So the first work is never with the ticket, it is with you. And once that shift settles quietly in your chest, you are ready for what comes next. Because a calm feeling is good, but a calm feeling that has learned how to speak is even better. I declare my word goes before me and prospers me now. Key 2. It is not the numbers, it is the self choosing them. The second key is this. It is not the numbers you choose. It is the self you choose to be while choosing them. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that self-concept is destiny, that a person cannot outperform the way they secretly see themselves. So if somewhere inside you carry the quiet label, "I am someone who almost wins but never quite does," that label will follow you into every line, at every counter, no matter how many tickets you fold into your pocket. And here is the part most people never stop to notice. The label does not announce itself loudly. It does not stand up and introduce itself as your enemy. It simply lives underneath your ordinary sentences, the way a man might say lightly to a coworker, "Oh, I never win anything." Or a woman might laugh and say, "That's just my luck." Small sentences, forgettable sentences. And yet Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the subconscious does not judge whether a sentence was said in jest. It simply accepts the sentence as instruction and gets to work building a life that matches it. Picture a man who has told himself for a decade, "I am the type who just misses." He buys with a shrug. He half expects nothing. He even jokes about it in line. "Watch, I'll get maybe 2 numbers right." And nothing dutifully arrives. Not because the universe is unkind, but because the outer scene has no choice but to agree with the inner conviction. It was simply following orders it had been given for years. Now think of his sister, standing behind him in that very same line. She has spent years quietly rehearsing a different sentence, "Supply finds me easily." And when the numbers do not match for her either that week, she does not fold. She simply says, "Well, not through that door then," and goes home unbothered. Because her sense of self was never resting on one drawing, it was resting on a settled inner conviction that good is always moving toward her, through some channel or another. Notice, neither of them controlled the numbers on the paper. The numbers were identical for both of them. Random, indifferent. But the atmosphere each of them carried into that store was not identical at all, and Florence Scovel Shinn would say that atmosphere, not the numbers, is the true purchase being made every single time. Think also of how differently these two would speak the very next morning. The brother wakes and says, "Of course it didn't work. It never does," and reaches for his phone, already bracing for another disappointing day. While the sister wakes and says, "Something good is arranging itself for me today," and goes about her morning with her shoulders soft and her breath easy. Same losing ticket, same quiet kitchen. Entirely different day being built from entirely different words. Now picture that same man deciding, quietly and without announcing it to anyone, without needing applause or proof, "I am someone supply moves toward, not someone chasing supply." He still stands in the very same line, under the very same fluorescent lights. He still buys the very same ticket, but he is no longer the same man buying it. And Florence Scovel Shinn would say that this shift, small and silent as it looks from the outside, is the entire transaction that matters. Everything else is scenery. This is not super. This is Florence Scovel Shinn's whole teaching in miniature. Change the self-concept, and the outer arrangement of your life must rearrange itself to match it, the way water rearranges itself around a new shape of glass. So ask yourself honestly tonight, what have I been calling myself in these small, unnoticed sentences, and are you willing to retire that title for a better one? Not someday, but starting with the very next sentence you speak. I declare I am the one that good fortune moves toward. Key 3. It is not the tight grip, it is the open hand. The third key is this. It is not the tight grip that brings the good, it is the open hand. Florence Scovel Shinn taught again and again that anxiety is a form of negative faith. A faith aimed backward at what we fear instead of forward at what we desire. And there is nothing that produces a tighter grip in a person than the thought of what a windfall could fix. The bills that could finally rest, the debt that could finally close, the shoulders that could finally drop. And so people grip the ticket the way a drowning person grips a rope, but a rope gripped in terror is far less steady than a rope held in calm trust. Think of a man who buys his ticket, then spends the rest of the evening replaying every worry it might solve, checking his phone, doing math in his head, silently begging the universe to come through. That grip does not summon supply any faster. In fact, it holds supply at arm's length, because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we must release a thing into the unseen with the same trust a farmer releases a seed into soil. not digging it up every hour to see if it has grown. Picture that same evening a little more closely. The ticket sits on the kitchen counter under the light, and every time he walks past it, he glances down. And each glance is a tiny tug on the rope, a tiny withdrawal of the trust he only just planted. By 9 o'clock, he has walked past that counter maybe 15 times. 15 small acts of doubt, stacked one on top of the other. And Florence Scovel Shinn would say he has spent the whole evening quietly undoing at the counter what he tried to establish in his own consciousness only hours before. This is what a clenched fist does. It does not protect the good. It exhausts the very channel the good was meant to travel through. Now picture a neighbor down the hall who buys her ticket that same night, sets it inside a drawer, closes the drawer, and does not open it again until the numbers are called. She waters her plants. She reads to her children. She sleeps soundly, not because she does not care, but because she cares enough to trust the process instead of choking it with worry. Releasing does not mean indifference, it means confidence. The kind of confidence that does not need to keep checking whether the seed is still there beneath the soil. So once you have bought your ticket, let it go. Literally set it down, speak your word over it, and then turn your attention back to your evening, back to your family, back to your peace. Because supply flows fastest through a relaxed and open channel, never through a clenched fist. This same open hand is what you carry into every other place money moves through your life. The bill you pay, the bank balance you check, the invoice you send. All of it flows more freely the moment the grip loosens. This is the very posture the rest of these keys are going to ask you to practice, and it only gets easier from here. Now, before we continue, if this way of thinking about supply feels like something you want to build a daily practice around, the Overflow Covenant was created for exactly that. A gentle companion for training the consciousness that draws money. More on that shortly. Now let us continue. I declare I release my good, and it returns to me multiplied. Key 4. It is not asking that moves heaven fastest, it is thanking. The fourth key is this. It is not asking that moves heaven fastest, it is thanking. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that praise and gratitude, spoken in advance, are among the most powerful tools available to a person, because thanksgiving is faith already convinced of its answer, while asking, however sincere, still carries the faint shadow of doubt inside it. Notice the difference for yourself. Asking says, please let this come, while thanking says, this is already arranged, and I simply have not seen it yet. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the second posture moves far faster than the first, because it matches the very rhythm of supply itself. Supply does not wait to be convinced, it waits to be recognized. Picture a man who checks his bank balance every single morning the moment he wakes, before his feet even touch the floor. He opens the app with his stomach already tight, hoping the number is bigger than he remembers. And when it is not, he sighs and starts the day already bracing for lack. He asks all day long without knowing he is asking. Please let the check come soon. Please let this stretch far enough. And each small please is a small confession that he does not yet believe supply is already moving toward him. Now picture that same man deciding, before he even opens the app, to say quietly, thank you for the supply already arranged for me in ways I cannot yet see. He still checks the same balance. He still has the same bills waiting on the counter. But he checks it now from a settled place rather than a frightened one, and Florence Scovel Shinn would say that this one shift, done morning after morning, begins to change the very channel through which his money moves. Because gratitude spoken in advance is not wishful thinking, it is a decree. And a decree spoken calmly carries a different authority than a request whispered in fear. Think also of the woman standing before the ticket counter. Before she even reaches the register, she says inwardly, thank you for the flow of good already circulating toward me. She is not thanking for a jackpot specifically. She is thanking for the flow itself, the ever-present, ever-moving current that Florence Scovel Shinn called divine supply. And that current does not depend on one ticket, one drawing, one Saturday night. It depends only on her staying in a state of grateful expectancy. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that whatever we hold in grateful expectancy tends to move toward us by the shortest possible road, because gratitude keeps the channel wide open while worry narrows it to almost nothing. So try this the next time you find yourself hoping for a windfall of any kind, whether it is a small check, an unexpected refund, or simply enough left over at the end of the month. Do not beg. Thank. Thank as though the door has already opened. Thank before the evidence arrives rather than after, because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that thanking after the fact is only good manners, but thanking in advance is faith in motion. And faith in motion is what actually moves the outer world to rearrange itself. Watch how differently the whole evening feels in your body the moment thanking replaces asking. The shoulders drop, the breath deepens, the small clenched worry in the chest simply has nowhere left to live. I declare I give thanks now for the supply already on its way to me. Breathe with me for just a moment, and if these keys are opening something in you, subscribe, so tomorrow's teaching finds you the same quiet way this one did. That one small action keeps the door open between us. Key 5. It is not the winning, it is the death of the old self. The fifth key is this. It is not the winning that changes a life, it is the death of the old self that never believed it could. And I want to be very clear about what that word means here, because Florence Scovel Shinn was never speaking of the body. She was speaking of the old false identity. The tired, inherited self that whispers, "I never get the good things." That self has to be allowed to dissolve, so the true self, the one supply was always moving toward, can finally step forward and live. This is not a small idea. It is the very hinge on which everything else in tonight's teaching swings. Because you can practice a calm state and choose a better self-concept and open your hand and speak your thanks in advance and still find the old self quietly reasserting itself in the background, like a tenant who refuses to leave a house that no longer belongs to him. So we must look at him directly tonight, gently, without shame, but directly. First, consider how ordinary a day can be, while this old self quietly runs the whole show. A woman wakes at 7, and before her feet even touch the floor, she thinks, another tight month. At 8, she pours her coffee and sighs at the mail on the counter. At noon, she scrolls past a story of someone else's windfall and feels a small bitter twist in her chest. At 3, she catches herself saying to a coworker, "Oh, I never win anything. I am just not the lucky type." At 5, she stops at the counter and buys her ticket the way she always does, out of habit more than hope. At 7, she tells her sister on the phone, "Well, if I won, I would probably do something to mess it up anyway." And by 9, that night she is asleep, having spoken maybe 40 sentences all day that quietly agreed with lack. This is not a bad woman. This is simply a woman who has never been shown that her own words were shaping her whole day the entire time. Florence Scovel Shinn would look at that day and say, "Do you see it? The ticket was the smallest decision she made all day." The real damage and the real deliverance were both happening in the sentences. Second, consider what it looks like when that old self is finally allowed to die and the true self begins to speak instead. The same woman wakes and says, "I am grateful for this new day of supply." She pours the same coffee, but she says over the mail, "Order is established in my finances now." At noon, when she sees someone else's good news, she says silently, "If it happened for them, it can happen through me too. There is enough for all." At 3, when the old sentence rises up in her throat out of pure habit, she catches it mid-breath and says instead, "Supply flows to me easily and remains." At 5, she buys the very same ticket, but she does it lightly, almost playfully, saying, "My word is my wand, and I bless this exchange." At 7, on the phone with her sister, she says, "I would know exactly what to do with it, because I have been practicing being someone who handles supply well." And by 9, she is asleep, having spoken 40 sentences that agreed with abundance instead of lack. Nothing about her outer day changed. The coffee, the mail, the ticket, the phone call, all identical. Only the self doing the speaking had changed. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this is the entire secret of a transformed life. Not new circumstances, a new voice inside the same circumstances. Third, consider why this death has to happen at all. Why the old self cannot simply be reasoned with or ignored into silence. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we are always, whether we notice it or not, decreeing our own future with the words we speak the most casually. The old self was built the same way, sentence by sentence, over years. Every time you said, "I never get a break," you were laying one more brick in a house you did not consciously choose to build, and a house built of years of bricks does not fall from one polite request. It has to be allowed to come down plank by plank, the same way it was built. Think of it also as a path worn into a field, walked so many times that the grass never grows there anymore. One gentle new footstep does not undo years of that groove. The new path has to be walked again and again, deliberately, until slowly the old path forgets it was ever a road at all, and the grass begins to return. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn placed such weight on repetition, on speaking the new word again and again until it outweighs the old one. This is not weakness. This is simply how consciousness has always worked. Fourth, consider the exercise I want you to actually do this week. Pause for a moment right now and pick one real sentence you catch yourself saying often. Something like, "I never win anything," or "Money just slips through my hands." Write it down if you can, and then, right beside it, the new sentence the true self would say instead. Something like, "Supply flows to me easily and remains." Speak the new sentence over the old one every single time the old one tries to rise up. This is not pretending. Florence Scovel Shinn was clear that this is not denial of circumstance. It is the deliberate choosing of which voice gets to shape your circumstance going forward. Fifth, consider what happens in the days right after you begin this practice, because the old self rarely leaves quietly on the first attempt. Some mornings it will come back sounding almost convincing, whispering the same tired line in a slightly different voice, perhaps disguised as caution, perhaps disguised as being realistic. And when this happens, do not treat it as proof that nothing is working. Treat it the way you would treat a tenant slowly packing his boxes, sometimes lingering in the doorway, sometimes wandering back in to collect one more forgotten thing. This is completely ordinary. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the subconscious simply needs consistent, patient instruction, the way a garden needs daily watering long after the seed has already been planted. One sunny afternoon does not raise a harvest, and one bold declaration does not instantly retire a decade of habit. But a seed watered faithfully, day after ordinary day, cannot help but eventually break the surface and become impossible to miss. So when the old sentence returns, simply meet it again with the new one, calmly, without frustration, without treating its visit as failure. Because each time you answer it with the true self's voice instead of the old one, the old self grows a little quieter, and the true self grows a little louder, until one day, without any dramatic announcement, you notice the old sentence simply does not come anymore, and the true self, the one supply had been waiting to meet all along, is the only voice left standing in the room. Let the old self die quietly tonight, without ceremony, without struggle, simply by refusing to feed it one more sentence. And let the true self rise up in its place and finally speak. Speak these words before you buy the lottery ticket. But even more than that, speak these words before you buy into any old belief about who you are and what you deserve. I declare the old self is dissolving now, and the true self speaks in me. Key 6. It is not the ticket at all. It never was. The sixth key is this. It is not the ticket at all. It was never the ticket. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the outer object we chase is only ever a picture of the inner state we have already accepted as true. So the folded paper in your pocket tonight is not the treasure. It is only a mirror. And a mirror can only ever show you back the face you brought to it. Think for a moment about the morning after any drawing. Somewhere a woman wakes and reaches for her phone before her eyes are even fully open. She checks the numbers. Her stomach tightens. None of them match. And in that instant the old voice rushes in and says, "See, it never works for you. It was foolish to even hope." That voice feels true because it has been rehearsed for years. But it is not true. It is simply the old self trying to reclaim the room, now that the ticket gave it an excuse. Now picture a different woman waking to that very same news. No numbers matching, nothing outwardly changed, but she has done the work of these keys. She checked her state before she bought. She spoke rather than begged. She released the ticket instead of gripping it. She gave thanks in advance. And so when the numbers do not match, she simply says, "My supply was never sitting in that drawing anyway," and she goes on to make her coffee in peace. And consider too the opposite picture. A man who does win a small sum that same week, a few $100s, enough to feel like proof. And because his old self never truly died, it rushes in dressed as celebration, spending the winnings within days on things that vanish. And within a month he is standing at the very same counter again, just as tight, just as hungry. Because the money changed, but the consciousness receiving it never did. Florence Scovel Shinn would say, the ticket gave him a gift his inner state could not yet hold, so it slipped through him the way water slips through a hand, still shaped like a fist. This is why the sixth key matters most of all. The winning or the losing was never the real event. The real event was always which self stood at the counter, which self opened the envelope, which self spoke the next sentence afterward. It is not the outcome that proves your consciousness. It is your consciousness that goes on proving itself long after any single outcome has come and gone. It is not the winning ticket that makes a person wealthy. It is the person who no longer needs the ticket to feel wealthy. And it is not the losing ticket that makes a person poor. It is only the old self mistaking a single mirror for the whole of supply. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the moment you stop needing a single event to prove you're good, that is the very moment your good stops depending on any single event. So let the ticket be light in your hand tonight. A small gift rather than a gamble. Hold it the way you would hold a sealed envelope you already trust is good news. Speak these words before you buy the lottery ticket, and then let those same words carry you calmly through whatever the morning after may bring. Because the true wealth was never waiting in a drawing somewhere out ahead of you. It has been quietly gathering inside your own spoken word the entire time. I declare I am established in supply, regardless of any outcome. Here is the whole picture. It is not the ticket that has power. It is the state behind it. It is not the numbers you choose. It is the self doing the choosing. It is not the tight grip that brings good. It is the open, released hand. It is not asking that moves fastest. It is thanking, spoken in advance. It is not winning that changes a life. It is the quiet death of the old self, so the true self can finally speak. And it is not the ticket at all. It never was. Every single key you just received was only ever one key turning further into the same lock. The recognition that your word, spoken calmly and believed quietly, is the real currency you have been holding all along. The lottery counter was simply the mirror that showed you which self was doing the talking. If you want a steady daily companion for training this consciousness, for practicing these very words until they become as natural as breathing, the Overflow Covenant was built exactly for that. A gentle, guided path through Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching on supply, on the spoken word, on self-concept, and on faith, available for a simple offering of $33, fully guaranteed. If it does not bless you, simply ask and it is returned to you in full. You will find the link in the description below this teaching. And Florence Scovel Shinn would remind you that supply is never really about a single ticket or a single drawing. It is about becoming the kind of consciousness that overflow naturally seeks out. So once more, from your own lips, say it with me. I am not buying luck. I am declaring my good. My word is my wand.